All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Villain Viver podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Elk, and along with me today we have.
Oh,
Ash.
Alex. Oh,
You go.
you go.
I'm Ashley.
I'm Alex.
All right, and today Ashley and I will be interviewing Alex from season 8 of Villain Viver about his experiences playing in our season. So, first things first, what brought you here to apply to Villain Viver in the first place?
Okay, so Roman Roman. I've known Roman for like 2 years, I think now. And so Roman told me she was playing in season 5. And so I joined the server to be like, yay, Roman, let's go. And so I just stayed in it because I never left. And then I think one time I get a ping spectators or whatever to vote on fan favorites for season 7. And so I saw Roman on the list. So I clicked Roman's name. And then she's like, wait, you're in here? And I'm like, yeah. And then like she said they were doing a season 8. And she told me specifically not to apply because she said it would be like really heavy. And I did it without telling her. And so she was pretty shocked that I did that. But I just wanted to do another org because I haven't done one since like July. And I wanted to try one that was fully on Discord because I've only done one on Roblox until now. So yeah, I just saw that it was open. I'm like, you know what? I need something fun to do because I'll have 2 breaks coming up and finals. And let me tell you, school was so bad, but I don't regret it.
Now, you mentioned that you've been in the server for a couple seasons. Were you someone who was following the last couple seasons closely, or was
No,
it something that you just okay?
I didn't even remember that I was in here until like I got a ping or whatever to vote for fan favorite, and then I voted for Roman, and
Gotcha.
then we just started talking more, and so yeah, like I had not been paying attention.
Well, let's fast forward then to the night of cast reveal. Were you surprised when you ended up making it onto the cast, or had you felt pretty confident going in?
I mean, I spent like a long time on my app, and so I was like hopeful, but I was also like, maybe not because I haven't done any yet, but I was like really happy to be on, but I was also like, if Roman like doesn't let me get cast, I'll kill her. So I'm kidding, but I was really happy that I was on. But I always like get anxiety about like things going wrong, but I had a good feeling. So
We go from the cast reveal into the reveal of the first twist of the season, which is, of course, our duos twist, where you found out that you were going to be partnered up with Ricey for the beginning of the season. So, what were your first reactions on meeting your partner, Ricey?
well, my first interactions with Ricey for like the first few days were him gaslighting me in a VC for like a while. Like it kept going on. And so it wasn't like great, but he was fun to talk to. And having him be my duo and then having Izzy, who was like someone who I liked talking to a lot, having her partner Zap being on the same tracks, I'm like, that could be something that works for us because we could like keep each other safe, keep each other in the know. That was when we were still thinking that burrows mattered, but it would be like a good ford across, like try to communicate a bit.
Going from there directly into the boroughs, since you've mentioned them, did you have any strong first impressions of the other players in your borough? Like, who made a big impression on you in those first couple of days?
So first couple of days, I'd say like the first person who like really stuck out to me was Izzy because she was just so easy to talk to. She like was saying all the right things, and I remember writing in my confessions like Izzy's literally my favorite person here, probably going to be everybody else's favorite person here. And I'm like, I really want to get close with her because getting close to someone who's going to be good with a lot of people is like would have been really good for me moving forward. But was just one of the people who I felt like everyone would have to love. Like, there's no way you couldn't like her. Staggy definitely stood out because he was like very blunt. He was very to the point, and he was very like he was pretty funny, but he was like one of those like straight man, and he was like very aggressive about it. but he was pretty funny because he's like around my age, so we had a bit in common. Ginger, first person I met from Discord who lived in Missouri, so we immediately clicked on that because that was part of my marooning, like cast reveal joke, was that I'm from Missouri. So I got put with the only other person from Missouri that I've ever met on Discord on here, and I watched Ginger play in the sequester preseason, so I was intrigued with him. Um, let's see who else is there. Malachi and Chip. Those two I didn't really talk too much the first days. They kind of like, well, Chip didn't know how message requests worked, so she didn't know what the hell was going on for the first few days. So like no one thought she was alive. And Malachi, he was like a little dry the first few days, but as it moved on, I liked talking to him a lot more. But on our initial burrow, I'd say definitely like the people who stood out to me the most were Izzy, Ginger, and Staggy.
Okay. So from there, we move to our first challenge, which you competed in with your duos. And unfortunately, that challenge didn't end up going so well for you and Ricey, and you ended up attending the first tribal of the season.
Yeah. So,
How nervous were you when you saw that you were going to be attending the first tribal?
well, nobody wants to be first food. That's like the most embarrassing thing that could ever happen to you. But I was in a position where I was going to tribal with two people from my burrow and my duo. So I was feeling like there's less chance of me going home, but more chance of my duo going home. And I didn't really want that. So I was like I'm always anxious. Like, don't get me wrong. I was anxious that vote too. I'm like, they could all be pulling something because maybe I came off too strong. But from the first day, I would say like just no one wanted to say a name. It was like a lot of people felt like it would probably become who was the only other person who was on like solo from their tribe. It was either Disc or Squid, but I think it was Disc. He was the only person from his burrow. There were three Bronx members: Siffy, Joey, and I think Chris. But I was like worried that it'd become my partner over uh, anyone else because he doesn't have one. So I was like trying to focus on making sure that my partner would be brought in with the Queens people. And then the next day, it became like Sifficon threw out, to me at least, he said, I think Sifficon said I don't remember, but they said Joey's name, which I was shocked about. I didn't think anyone would throw out their own burrow's name. And then Malachi was fine with Joey going because apparently Joey didn't talk to him much. Joey didn't talk to many people much. And I think everyone was like talking about that, very aware of it. But I didn't think it would like collapse in that soon or be that easy. But as like the day went on, like a couple of us were feeling like Sifficon's doing a bit too much. Maybe we keep Joey because he might like try to work with us down the road. But so it was I think myself, Rissy, Chris, and Disc who had talked about possibly doing Siffy, but we would have needed Malachi as a number for that. And Malachi didn't want to do it. And so that confused me the most because I'm like, there's something in the thing that said we'd get benefited from keeping a duo. And he didn't want to, but like at the end of it, he was like, yeah, I just don't want to go back to Queens having voted off Chip's partner, which is like valid. So then Joey just went 7-1. I wasn't like too nervous, but I was like, as usual, I have anxiety for problems, so I'm like always assuming the worst.
Yeah, that was one of those tribals, especially as you said, like no one wants to have to worry about being the first boot.
Yeah,
Um, Basically, like there became two targets there, and both you and Ricey ended up not being either of them. So
yeah.
did you feel like you'd established like a decent footing for yourself in the game at that point then?
I mean, I'd only been able to talk with a few people, and I'd already shown that I was horrible in competitions. So I wasn't like, oh yeah, I've set footing. But I did have my first like alliance with Chip and Malachi called Losing Queens because we had been talking a lot and we are like, we need to stay on the same page. because we don't want to look a mess if we have to come back and boroughs become like established things. So I think the whole vote was just about not looking like a total mess. But I did really like Disc after that vote. So I was like, he was like the person I think moving after that vote that I wanted to work with the most.
That makes a lot of sense. So then we go into the second round in which you competed as duos. This time you and Ricey are going to finish in the middle of the pack,
Yeah.
not in the reward group, but also not in the tribal group.
Yeah.
Do you think that things would have gone badly for either of you if you had been at that tribal? Or do you
Um,
feel like the bonds you made from that first tribal plus Tificon's threat level would have put you in a solid position if you had gone to it?
the bonds that I had made the first time wouldn't have really mattered the second time because the only people who stayed at both tribals were Siffy and Chip. So it didn't like the people I talked to during the first one, it wouldn't have mattered for the second one because the second group was a different set of people. Like, I think I really don't know how it would have gone for us because that would have been an entirely different situation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So also at this point in the season, unlike what Ricey told you about safaris involving filming yourself, you'd started
Yeah.
getting the chance to explore our safari. And I'll take this opportunity to just ask more for your overall thoughts on the safari from this season.
I liked it, but one thing I didn't like was the logo for it being the lights and stuff for Stranger Things because it seemed really out of place to the point where I thought it was like some big clue to try to figure out something. So I kept finding pictures that had like these weird colors in them and be like, oh, this is another hint for that. So that like led me on a wild goose chase for literally fucking nothing. Like I spent so long fixated on a literal like just oh I forgot to change it. Like that was embarrassing and it was like so stressful for me because I thought I was getting somewhere, but then I'm like, you know, this is gonna be really humiliating if there was nothing there.
Now, obviously, you will go on to find a couple of things in the safari over the course of the season.
Yeah.
Um, One of the funniest moments related to the safari was when you ended up stumbling across the treasure idol.
Oh my god, I found that on accident and it was like such a bad day for me too. But that happened the day before the Logan vote. And so, so I think the first thing, wait, no. Okay, so yeah, I'll just talk about the treasure idol. But so I had found the A and the F bolded letters, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna start guessing words because I'm like, maybe I'll accidentally get it. But then I'm like, I probably won't. 'Cause it's probably some big like thing. And then I was like, you know what? What do they call like what do idols do? I'm like, okay, safety. And then that worked. And I was like, are you kidding me? And I thought I was going to be in so much trouble for like breaking the system.
No, if you find it, it's yours.
Yeah. And so then I got an idol, but then that idol fucking sucked. Like it would put votes on you anytime. And I've never played an orc, so I don't know like if these are common. So I'm like, you know, these people probably eat, sleep, breathe orcs. They'll know immediately. They'll know that there's something wrong if they see like an extra vote that's cast for me at multiple tribals in a row. Like they'll be like, yeah, that's something up.
Yeah, I definitely think as much as having an idol in your pocket would go on to end up being quite useful at a certain vote in the future, um, it also definitely contributed to the paranoia, I'll say, of those couple episodes there.
Yeah. I just
Um,
assumed people were like gonna think through stuff more than I usually because I overthink everything. And so I'm like, everyone's gonna be thinking high caliber because this is supposed to be like really competitive. And so everyone's gonna be like sniffing everything out and be like really smart about it. But I don't think anyone thought of it whenever I got a random vote on me and they had to read all five. Well, not even all five, but there were six votes for Sadie, and they were at five. I'm like, if it was a 5-2-1-1, it would have stopped at four. But I don't think anyone like thought about that.
I think one of the things with that is that it might be easy for people to tell that there's something fishy going on in that vote. but the search space of what sort of fishy things could be happening is so large that I think it would be hard for someone to figure out exactly what was happening in that vote.
Yeah.
Like, it's the difference between, okay, that's weird, something doesn't add up, and being able to follow that, like, actually to the conclusion of what it was. Like, I do think people probably realized to some extent that something a little bit weird was happening, but
Yeah.
actually reaching the conclusion of why something weird was happening was the harder step.
Yeah.
But stepping back now to where we are after the final 23 tribal, we reveal the next major twist of the season, the constant swapping in this season, starting with our two tribes of 11 and going through many, many more iterations of
Yeah.
swaps. How did you feel the constant swapping affected your game in this season?
How it affected my game? Well, I don't remember. I think I went to either 6 or 7 pre-merge tribals out of like the 11 or so. So it was like really stressful, constant swapping, especially when I was back in school, because there would be people who I didn't talk to much that I'd have to like keep reestablishing connections to. Or I was like, especially when you're like, I want to take a big shot, you're so nervous that you get swapped into a position where you have no control anymore. But that was like the fun of it, because it's like no one's safe for everything. Like you can talk to more people. The only person I'd ever met was Vic. So I liked the twist. It was just really exhausting too, having to constantly be at like the fate of just like chance, really.
Yeah. I think in terms of what you said, it's a very interesting thing that you said about like the consequences of your moves. Because it almost seems like we had a little bit of a bijection in how people saw the moves that you made in light of the swap twist, where some of the players on this cast seem to think, okay, well, you could swap onto a tribe with anyone. So the entire game is one structure, even though we're on separate tribes. But all of your moves have permanent consequences no matter what. Well, other people said, like, if I blindside someone on one of these tribes, well, I wake up tomorrow morning and I'm on a new tribe. Like, there are effectively zero consequences to anything I do because these tribes aren't real. And, there's effectively a reset in the game tomorrow anyway. So
I think
which side of that divide did you see yourself on?
I'm on there. There's more consequences because with the duos choice and with constant swaps, everyone was getting information everywhere. Like it wasn't like, oh, it's the blindsided and your relationships are contained to one tribe. Your relationships are contained within the entire game now because you're going to be talking to basically everyone. So you could strain relationships on one tribe by blindsiding someone. They'll have enough time to pick up the pieces, realize what happened, and then they can talk to more people and paint you as shady before you can get swapped onto a tribe and you're not even on the people who you just blindsided as tribe, but they can just spread your like dirt all over your name as long as you're not there. So I think there's way more consequences because now the game is much more fluid. You're not just like in a box of who you can talk to because at you're gonna pretty much be with everyone. So it's like you burn your relationships, you could be put into a spot where they now have the power. Like I don't think there should ever be the thought that there's no consequences for it because people aren't like that. People aren't like, oh, it's a new tribe, I'll get over it.
It's very interesting. And that divide in our cast in terms of how people saw it, I think was one of the interesting through lines of the season. But I think from your perspective, it definitely makes a lot of sense to see it that way. Um, from there you end up, I believe you were at the tribe that voted sushi out. That ended
Yeah,
up being a
final
fairly
20.
straightforward vote.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
kind of. So the day before, so I'd say like during that period of time, Logan and I were talking and we were like, we wanted to do Ava because she wasn't talking as much to us. But then the next morning, Ginger and Sean both, no, Ginger and Disc, they both want sushi out over Ava. So like I was very unsure as to why. And that's the reason why I started like getting really anxious that day because I'm like, this doesn't make sense why they both wake up like really early and all of a sudden want to vote out sushi. And then Sean was fine with sushi, and we were like, if we try to make waves here, it's gonna come back to bite us, and especially over Sushi, who was literally not even talking to anyone. Apparently, he didn't even want to. But yeah, and I think before that vote is whenever I found the sunset, because I remember contemplating like, if we want to do Ava, I could just do that, but I never told anyone about the sunset until after the season.
I think that's actually a good time to touch on the sunset advantage. So, having found the sunset advantage, which would allow you to hide the actual votes and vote count of a tribal and only reveal the player who was eliminated, um, what was your reaction to finding the advantage? And did you immediately think this was going to be a useful advantage, or was it a while before you
So
found schemes to use it through?
I remember going through the thoughts of it. I'm like, this could be used in a lot of different ways. My initial thought was, I want to keep this until merge, till I want to make some like big plurality move or like some flip where I want to cover my tracks and cover my alliances tracks and cause like paranoia amongst other people. Because I've played like the games that I usually play, everyone's like really big move heavy and everyone's like really like game body and because everyone knows each other, so no one gets like that affected by personal relationships anymore. Because everyone's basically like, you know what, it's a game, let's just play it. And so it's basically like everyone's doing everything for Team TV, even though our specs are like confessionals aren't open to people. But it's like everyone wants to make these big flashy moves, and I'm like, this would be a great like tool to hide my tracks if I ever want to do that later on. And I end up not having it later on anyways, but it worked for like part of the reason I wanted. But at first I was like, this is kind of useless because everyone always says who they voted anyways. But like the more and more I thought about it, the more useful I thought it could be. But it just had to be like people had to be willing to keep lying.
Yeah, from there we'll actually then talk about the really dramatic Logan vote here. So we go into Final 20. We have the Palau style double tribal, where we have individual immunity on each tribe, and each tribe is going to be voting one person out of the game. So, from your perspective, how did the plan to get Logan out of the game at this point come together?
So I had been talking to Logan since I want to say Final 22 or 21, I can't remember. But I really liked talking to him. He was like so charming. He was like one of the nicest people to talk to. He always made me feel really good about myself. And then I met Lisa, and Lisa was much more transparent about how she was, because she was like, "Oh, I'm not gonna be a liar." And then I look at her cast card and it's like, "I'm here to spill blood," and I'm like, "Okay, where's the truth?" But I think I meet Tig for the first time. I think I'd already met Elle at that point on the final 22 tribes, but I meet Tig and Elle. And so initially I remember because had been talking to Logan previously about how he thought Chip was still mad at him for the Siffy vote. And this was before Chip and I like were super close, super close. But I still wanted to have Chip around because I could tell Chip was loyal with how like defensive over Siffy Chip felt. Um, I wanted to have Chip around. And the more I talked to him and Lisa, they were like, Chip's probably going to be super mad at us and she's inactive. So I'm like, I told them ahead of time before they even told me Chip's name. I'm like, I'm definitely not open to voting Chip off. And then on that tribe, it was, let's see, Logan, Lisa, Disc, Squid. There were 3 duos on the tribe because Tig and Elle were also there, but Logan had told me like that me, Lisa, Disc, and Chris could all be a 5. And I'm like, I don't want to be a fifth wheel to a duo, like a duo block. Because they had been, I think they were one of the duos that was seen. I don't know. I don't know. I really can't remember. But I did not want to be like a fifth wheel. So that immediately turned me off. And then like they were saying Chip's name to me, and that turned me off because I was like already telling them that I was not open to doing that. So it didn't feel very good having what I was saying disregarded entirely just because they didn't like Chip or whatever. And then came the whole like microaggressions thing, but I don't really feel like getting into that because I did feel like Chip was being treated really unfairly. And so during all of that, I was like talking to Zap because that was the first time I'd met her. But I talked like kind of through Izzy to her a bit, just like to get to know like because Izzy said she really liked Zap, but Zap was like pretty straightforward, and I like that in an ally, just someone who's not gonna bullshit me. But Zap was like, yeah, I really don't feel good about Logan just because of how he was like bringing up my past orgs, or Lisa was, or whatever. And so then whenever Logan brought up Chip's name, I talked to Zap about that, and it was like, I don't really feel comfortable with this. I don't want to do Chip, and Zap's like, I don't want to do Chip either. I talked to Ginger about it. He didn't want to do Chip either. And then I was like, I told Zap about my idol because I'm like, you know what, this could be bad if I don't, because I wasn't sure where Tig or Elle stood in terms of Logan, because Logan thought Tig was like close to him. So I was like very nervous about talking to Tig and Elle about possibly doing one of the like, because I wanted Chris or Logan out or Lisa. I didn't want Disc out because I really like Disc, but I talked to Zap like a lot, and she helped me feel better about talking to Tig and Elle about doing Logan. And so I just like, because I told Zap, because I was like, I'm going to idle Chip and we're going to go and target one of them because I don't care. And then I just ended up not using it because we had numbers. But um, like during that tribal, I was so anxious because I'm like, there's so much that could go wrong trying to make a move on someone who's very clearly social with everyone. But everyone seemed to not trust him, or they wanted to keep Chip a lot. So it felt kind of set, but I was really anxious. And then whenever we got to tribal, like I find out that Rissy got out. And so that made me like, oh my God, what the fuck is happening? I felt like I was about to spiral out of control at that moment.
Now,
But
did you have
before,
any vibes, any like feeling that Ricey was potentially going to be in trouble at that tribal on the other side?
no. I only knew that he was throwing out Malachi's name, which I was like, what are you doing? And then he wasn't responding to me because apparently he had fallen asleep or something. I don't even know. He was so he was so strange. But I don't know. So that was like a shock to me because I did not think that was ever gonna happen like that early. So I'm like, I have just lost my duo, and now I'm going into probably the most stressful tribal that I could possibly go into because we're like taking a shot at this, and I'm like, you know what? I want to take this shot. I want because also they wanted another unanimous boot on Logan. I mean on Chip, and I was like, I'm really sick of this boring ass game because everyone was going Unan, and everyone's like, oh, let's not shake it up or anything. And I'm like, I thought we were here to like play like a big org and be competitive. I'm like, this is boring. We're supposed to be having fun with this. So I was like so sick of it. I wanted to like just mess people's games up for the fun of it. Just because I'm like, this is supposed to be way more fun than how it's been. But everyone's too scared to. And so I was really happy that other people were finally willing to shake shit up. But before
So,
that happened, because they all thought it was going to be Yunnan, I was like acting like, oh, I can't do this to Chip. She's like my closest person. I'm not going to vote her. I think I'm going to have to rogue vote, guys. Is that okay with you? And they were all like, yeah, I guess since it's going to be Yunnan. No one really tried to stop me. And I'm like, I'm going to just do L because Disc threw L's name as like the decoy. And I'm like, I'll just do L. And I told that to Logan and Lisa. So I knew I'd have a cover up for when I played the Sunset because I knew I could paint it out as a 5-4-1 at least. To where, and then after, so I'd have to like basically cry about being manipulated and being used and rogue voting Logan out. But I was like just so bored. I was like willing to do anything at that point. So I spent a lot of time like trying to build up that I was going to rogue vote for Chip to like just rogue vote L, just because I would have felt too bad for Chip. And so then that's like close to when I decided to play the sunset, I guess. I don't even remember that day. It was so long ago. But I wanted to use the sunset for a few reasons. Mainly so, one, they wouldn't know what happened because we'd be swapping immediately. They wouldn't know who exactly did who. They wouldn't know that I hadn't done L. I could try to play double agent for as long as people weren't going to rat me out. And I told that to everyone who we had just voted with. I'm like, I told them I did L. Just let them think that. And they didn't because, of course, but it helped me for a bit. But I also wanted to hide the fact that I was going to have a stray vote coming on to me from the idol too. So I was like, I'm playing one of these advantages at the tribal because I'm like getting anxiety from holding on to it. But at that time, I felt like Logan was just the best option to go out of all of them, mainly because if we took a shot, him going was probably our best chance of not having to come back at us in full force. It felt like he wouldn't be able to raise an army against us the most out of any of them.
So as that vote plays out, it'll be Chris, Disc, Lisa, and of course Logan left voting on Chip, while the other 6 of you vote out Logan. Um, Lisa at least believes the L story at first, though the others are starting to catch on to you.
Yeah.
Um,
People owned up to their votes way too quick. Like, it was really annoying. So I'm like, we have a free cover up. Like, we can just say that they did it, make them fight each other.
what was the game plan if people didn't own up to their votes there? If it was still a mystery, how do you like if this goes perfectly according to your plan, you know, how do you intend to use that confusion to your advantage?
I mean, I didn't think it was going to last forever because obviously people aren't stupid. But I just wanted to like have at least a benefit of a doubt for a little bit, just because people were going to be pissed off, and I just wanted for things to be funny for once, like be interesting. Like we could have done more damage to that group without them knowing. But I don't think people were like thinking that deeply into it. I think people just wanted to like try to build up their connections after blindsiding someone. I'm like, oh, people get over it that quickly. Because in my mind, people don't get over things that easily, especially like with Lisa. So I'm like, I did not want to own up to it at first. I was like, I'll let them find out. I don't really care. I'm not going to own up to it myself.
I mean, I think it's one of those things, especially in a season like this, like what you own up to and what you don't ends up like really
Yeah,
depending on the situation and also potentially having huge consequences in terms of relationships in the game, like we've been talking about.
yeah.
Um, so from there, we go into the final 18. So at the final 18, we have one of our creative challenges. That's also where you're going to end up going to the tribal where Saggy goes out.
Yes.
Um, what was your relationship like with Saggy at that point in the game?
Well, we hadn't seen each other since Final 22. And people, I mean, I had just gone pretty much all in with the group that had voted out Logan. And Saggy was apparently close to Logan. And he was like, basically on Lisa's side. And he was like doing the absolute most sleuthing and stuff. And I'm like, I'm exhausted, dude. I have so much shit to do right now. Cause I had an exam like the next day, I think. And I had a lot of shit that day, but because I had to finish a stats group project, that was like whenever I was wrapping up school and stuff. But during that, he was like really pissing off a few people, like especially Zap. Him and Zap, I was like, I did not want them to fight because I would have preferred Lisa to go home so much more than Saggy. But Saggy was doing like way too much to try to like uncover the truth. When I'm like, it's just stop, dude. You're making it worse for yourself. But at the end of it, it became him and Zap like against each other because neither of them like were on the same
So can you
Hold
say
on.
that one more time? I think
Yeah, sorry, it
we
cut
were.
out because I got a phone call. Let me just text them. Sorry.
No worries. So at this point here, we're talking about the tribal where Sagi is ultimately going to end up going on in the game, and
Yeah.
specifically about the conflict between Sagi and Zap at that tribal.
Yeah. So during this especially because I was talking to Peanut and Sean because I felt like they were going to be swing votes either way, but Peanut was saying he would vote wherever I wanted to vote, and I'm like, I don't know. I was so busy that day. I'm like, I can't. And then I come back on, and it's pretty much landed onto Saggy, and I'm like, I'm not going to fight this because I don't want to vote Zap out right after voting with Zap because I'm like, that will immediately get everyone to blow up my entire game. But that was after I learned about Zap and Izzy exposing Rissy's friendship idol that had pretty much gotten him out. But Saggy was also a part of it. So I was pissed off at all of them. So part of me was almost about to flip on Zap just out of like spite. But I had to just hold myself back. So I'm like, I can't burn every single bridge that I have in the game in 2 tribals.
Now, if you had wanted to try to flip on Zap there, who would you have tried to flip with? Do you remember offhand?
Sean and Peanut, definitely. Like, it wouldn't have
Okay.
been Chip, Izzy, or L. But I'm like, I'm not about to burn Izzy, Chip, and L, who I'd all been trying to work with the whole time, for Saggy, who was like doing the most, and for Lisa, who I'd just like been lying to for a while.
Yeah.
So it was
And
sort of like an easy
obviously at
decision.
that tribal we get one of the spooky Alex votes,
Yeah,
but
that was.
no one ends up having much of an opinion about it at that point.
I don't get why no
I
one
think,
thought much of it, but
but also with that vote coming in like 5-2-1-1 or something like that, like
yeah,
there was enough chaos going on at that tribal for the vote for you not to be the most notable thing.
yeah. And I was like, just had to act like I had no clue what was happening. But I don't get how more people didn't catch on because like 5 votes were read at for Saggy when it should have only been 4. If it was a 5-2-1-1, should have been obvious it was 6 votes Saggy, but I don't think people really thought much of it. Like it was already confusing enough for them to process, I guess. They put all their brain power into that. But I don't know. It in my mind I would have been sketched out if there was an extra vote randomly at a tribal, but that's just me.
And Zap also threw like a rogue vote on Lisa at that tribal,
Yeah.
and so there was enough other chaos going on at that tribal that I think you managed to hide from it a little bit.
Yeah. People were owning up to so much during the season. I'm surprised like people didn't catch on when no one owned up to voting me.
It's an
But I
interesting
ended up
point. So
like
you think
everyone was
that
so
if
blatant.
someone had, yeah, so you think that people were playing so honestly that like the fact that no one owned up to voting you could have been in and of itself suspicious, basically?
Yeah. I mean, I would have taken it as suspicious if like there's a vote unaccounted for after basically every single tribal that we'd been to, people were saying who they had done without thought.
It's an interesting point. Um, so we go to the next round and we've merged, or at least, quote unquote
Just take
merged.
yeah.
Did you think that that merge was going to be real, or did you know right
No,
away that it
I
was going to
thought
be fake?
no, I'm you guys are like, we're swapping every round, and it was like only 5 rounds, really? Hell no. I'm like, this isn't good things don't happen in this season. It's based on a death book. So I'm like, we're not supposed to be that lucky. But I'm like, 17 people is way too big for a merge. But I was like, maybe they'll do a 17-person joint. I did not think it would be like the kind of greed that you guys did. I've never played in a season with greed before, so I was happy I didn't have to go to it because I was.
Well, you actually haven't seen like any forms of greed before in the seasons you've
I've
played?
I've I've seen one in a season that I watched, but we don't usually do greed things. No one's that creative.
Oh, interesting. Because yeah, I feel like that is sort of one of the staples, but obviously usually it's done with like tribal challenge where you get
Yeah.
individual immunity but send your tribe to tribal.
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah.
a slight little tweak on the formula to account for needing to do it in that fake merge scenario. Um, from there, we go to the infamous captains. So we have the captain advantage for the
Oh,
final
God.
16 swap. Zap has found one of the two captain's hats, and the other captain's hat had not been found, which meant
Yeah,
that
I
Zap
found like
had
a
the opportunity to. Yeah, you ended up finding it like around after it would have been used, but at the time, Zap got to give the second hat to a player of her choosing, and so therefore the second hat went to you for
Mhm.
the tribe swap there. Now,
Yeah.
you've mentioned a couple of times since the season that you were under the impression you were going to be picking like your entire tribe, not just one pick. If you'd known that you were only going to be picking the first person to join your tribe, who would you have wanted to pick for your tribe at that point?
I probably would have picked Chip or Ginger just because like I would have wanted someone who I was close with. The thing we both thought that we'd be picking the whole tribes, I guess. So I was like, I'm not gonna make who I'm working with as obvious right now as Zap is. And like a lot of animosity for that group came because of how they handled the tribe selection because they made it so obvious that it basically felt like a slap to everyone else's face. Like, you guys think we're so dumb we can't even see how like you guys are working together. But it ended up not affecting them that vote because they won. But yeah,
Yeah, so their
definitely.
tribe ends up winning that superpowers challenge, and that's going to send you to a tribal where despite having gotten to at least start choosing that tribe, your name is going to come out fairly quickly and you're going to be very much under the gun at this tribal.
Yeah, and I knew like once I saw how the tribes ended up being, I'm like, I'm so fucking screwed over here if we go to tribal. So I was hoping the other tribe would at least throw a vote out like Sean AU or something, because it felt like he wasn't really at the time. It didn't never felt like he was with that many people, just because I never talked to him once. So I'm like, I was hoping at least that group would throw if they saw that I was clearly going to go home, but they didn't. So I was like, I'm like, okay, I'm screwed. No one's going to throw a name to me because I'm with all the people who I've fucked over so far. And then I was with Malachi, Sean, and Disc, who I liked all of them, and Peanut, but I was like, none of them are going to go to bat to save me here, are they? And like, none of them did. But I woke up probably 2 hours before Tribal that day. And so I had some DMs from people like saying, oh, I've heard Peanut's name. And then Malachi had been like, yeah, you're in danger. Like, you need to look through the safari right now. And I'm like, okay, yeah. And so then Peanut's name had been thrown to me. Peanut told me that Lisa was throwing my name. So then I tell Peanut, I'm like, you know what? They're probably splitting votes between you and I or something. Like, they're using your name as the decoy. They want me to vote you. And he didn't like that, obviously. But so I promised him, like, I would play an idol for him if he voted with me to vote out either Jack or Lisa. And he didn't want to do Lisa because Lisa apparently steered votes off of him. So I'm like, okay, let's just do Jack then. You and I can put our votes on him because I have an idol for me and an idol for you and make sure that we both make it out of this. And yeah, so that was done like pretty shortly before tribal. It was not that far ahead plan because it's more so out of like, I just want to get someone out who I can't trust at all. And I want to make a statement here. So,
And it's interesting because we have heard over the course of some of the other interviews we've done in this postseason that like there definitely was a real consideration to splitting the votes between you and Peanut.
yeah, not
Um,
they had the numbers too.
So, like, I don't think it was a wasted play because there was definitely like a very real chance that split could have happened where your idol would just end up sending Peanut out.
Yeah, I wasn't like,
Instead, it ends up taking out Jack.
I knew I was possibly going to waste one, but I was like, they're either doing me or you. So I want to make sure at least one of these is played correctly because I want to send him home. I don't want to look stupid by wasting both idols. So I'm going to at least make sure I play one correctly and send someone who I want out home. And that's like, when I played the first one, then Lisa erupts on me in tribal chat, in the tribal council. And so I'm just like, oh my God, I can't with you right now. Like, why are you mad at me? You voted me. I haven't voted you once. But yeah, she
Now,
was pretty angry about me playing an idol and being in the game.
now, ultimately, like aside from Lisa being angry with you, do you feel like Jack going out there helped your game? Do you think someone other than Jack going out there would have been better looking back? Like,
Um, I think the only person who I would have benefited more from sending home would be Lisa, but Peanut didn't really want to do her, and if I had tried to split 1-1 with Peanut, then Malachi goes home probably. So I think sending Jack home was just, it was good for me because I had no relationship with him, and he was fine voting for me. So I didn't want to send Disc home. I didn't want to send Sean home. I didn't want to send Malachi home or anything. The only other person I think I would have like been okay with doing would be like Chris, just because like he's so dry.
and Chris at that tribal ends up voting for Malachi
I
there.
st- I
Um,
still it. For a while I thought it was
did you
Jack.
have did you have any conversations with Chris about that plan to vote, like about anything you were planning at that tribal, or do you have any insight as to why Chris was ended up voting Malachi there?
I have no idea why he did it. He probably just did it in case of an idol, but because he probably thought I'd be alone in whatever I did. I think most people
So
thought I'd be alone.
the idea being that even if you played the idol, there'd be able to be like a tie and a revote between whoever you put your vote
Yeah,
on and Malachi.
yeah. So I think that's just it. I don't think there was any like. I really don't think he did it out of anything other than like they're not splitting votes, so I'll split it for them.
Got it.
Yeah, I don't really.
Um,
That was that
from the
Malachi
re
was so random.
from there, we go into the last two rounds of our pre-merge. The final 15, obviously, which has the infamous throne challenge.
Yeah,
Did you have any strong response to seeing Gisk go out of the game the way he did?
I was so pissed. I like still, even though he had voted me, I still wanted to work with him because I just liked talking to him a lot, and I was mad that it was him and not Chris, and I was just mad because of how the duos were playing. They were playing like so blatantly obvious that they didn't care. They felt like they had all the power. I like wanted to strangle them all basically. But I was like the one challenge that I had, like one of the few challenges that I was safe from, like one of the few troubles I didn't go to during the pre-merge, had been thrown during a time I was like, you know what? I don't even feel good about winning this because it's the people who I'm like pissed at. They're throwing to get someone who I wanted to work with out. And I'm like, they're just doing it in such an obvious manner after they had like just left me by myself to like go home and like they just thrown a challenge to get someone else out and like you couldn't have thrown a challenge to save my life here. I don't know. It was really frustrating for me watching people play like they had all the power and didn't have to care if people knew what they were doing anymore.
Well, on the subject of rounds that were going to end up being frustrating, we go to the final 14 round.
Yeah.
And in that round, that's where Peanut's going to end up going out 5-2, and you were left voting for AU Sean along with Peanut there. I know you've said a couple times that like you would have been willing to vote out Peanut if you knew, but that you think you were left out of that vote because of having idled Peanut, so people assumed that you two were like super close.
Yeah, I think people like thought because I idled Peanut, that meant that we were like best friends when I'm like, I don't, what? That doesn't even make sense. Like, I only idled him to make sure Jack went home and it's just because he was the only one who would like talk to me during that tribal. I think people just like thought I was like closer to him than I really was. I was close to him. I liked talking to him, but he was like not someone who I was like going out of my way to like save over and over.
Now, if you saw someone play an idol for someone else, would you have assumed those two people were close to each other?
I mean, probably, but I literally told everyone that I was idling Peanut to make sure Jack went home
Okay, that's fair.
because the vote was
Um,
between me and Peanut, and I like explained a lot of the things that I did pretty thoroughly to some people, and I don't think people took my word for it. So, eh.
so at this point in the season, we're now on the brink of merge. So before we step into the merge game, I just want to ask if there were any challenges that really stood out to you from the pre-merge, anything that really was memorable or interesting to you.
No, I hated every single challenge like with a passion. Like I did horribly in almost all of them, and so like none of them were like fun for me really. Like
That's
some of
totally fair, yeah.
the only times where I think I was safe from a challenge, like or a tribal that my team had won a challenge for, were like times I didn't enjoy the challenge or people had thrown. So it was like I don't know. Anytime I was safe, it felt like an empty victory.
And was that in part because you felt like through the constant swapping, you had allies who were always on other tribes, so even when you could be happy that you were safe, like you were always worried about someone, even if it wasn't about yourself?
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I don't think I was ever like too worried about other people on other tribes like when they like would lose. I think whenever I won the I think final 22 challenge, that was the puzzle challenge. And so that was already stressful enough. I was safe at final. I didn't have to go to greed tribal, which was like okay. That was pretty funny though. Like I will get one of my targets out. I'm like, okay, Lisa. But and then the throwing one, I was like, that's just obnoxious. Especially
Now,
because
do you think there are ever situations where you would want to throw a pre-merge challenge?
I mean, I went to so many of them. Like, how do you know I didn't throw them? I must have been so bad at challenges. But no, I don't think I would have ever thrown any of them just because I'd already gone to so many and I was like already struggling keeping up with school and this as it was. So I don't think there was ever a point in which I was like, yay, let's go to another pre-merge tribal. So I'm pretty sure EA, Sean, and I went to the most pre-merge ones out of anyone. So I was never like, yay, let's go to more. Because I, by the end of pre-merge, basically my entire game had been like pulled out just because everyone like no one trusted me anymore. So I was exhausted.
So at that point, I guess we'll say, like right there on the brink of merge, how do you feel about your position in the game? Like, do you feel like you're in a decent spot in the game, or do
No,
you feel like you're in a very dangerous spot?
I felt like I was probably like on the bottom of every single aspect of it. The only thing I could like rely on was Chip, really. Except at that point, I had no more idols. People had known that I had played them. I had been fighting with Lisa and stuff. Like the only people who I liked talking to, I didn't even feel like they ever had my back much. So I was like, I'm just hoping things are gonna pick up and not just keep going downhill. So I'm like,
The
there's a lot.
relationship that you had with Chip in this season was actually like a really interesting storyline throughout the season. Like, you definitely seemed like you were both really there for each other quite a few times over the course of the season. Um, and while the Duo of the Season award this season ended up having a fairly understood reason for going to who it went to, like if we were giving honorable mentions for that, I definitely think you two would have been one of the honorable mentions there.
Yeah, I felt like from the time around the Logan vote to like till even after the season, 'cause Chip and I still keep in touch. Like Chip has been like one of my favorite people to talk to, just because she's just always herself. It's her first org ever. This was like my first like actual like org thing. So we were both like feeling like we were in the same position and stuff. People weren't really treating Chip right, and I've like really like just wanted to be there for her. And she's like someone who, if you're there for her, she'll be there for you. So she was just someone who I knew I could always talk to, and other people were like taking basically like more time to only care about if you mattered for their game or not to talk to you.
I think
So yeah,
that's a really
I'm
beautiful
like,
way of saying it.
I'm like so insanely happy that I got to meet Chip through this whole experience, because even when I was gone, she was literally fighting a war for me. So yeah, Chip has a special place in my heart now.
From there, we move into the merge tribal itself, where obviously we have the duo immunity, leaving only 6 names up there. And at that point, once again, as has happened at a couple of tribals throughout the first part of the season, you're going to end up finding out that your name has been tossed out
Yeah,
fairly early in the tribal round.
yeah. Let's see. I wonder if that person who threw that's in the VC or not. Oh wait, he is. But
So, how did you end up putting a plan together to survive that round?
so I mean, just starting it before the duo was having immunity was even announced. Like most of the singles were already talking to each other about wanting to go for the duo specifically because of how they'd been like acting like they had all the power in the game, and how they had been like just we're gonna steamroll if they had 6 out of 12. So we wanted to take a shot at them, and then all of them having immunity was like so bad for all of us. And my relationships with all of the singles, besides like Chip, was probably the most strained out of anyone else's, because Malachi had told me before like the final 15 tribal about the two Sean's singles club, because he was like, we could get me, you, Chip, Lisa to all join that, and we could like do something. So I would been wanting to work with all of them, but then whenever we had to shoot at ourselves, because I remember talking to some of them about it the night before. I'm like, if we like go after each other and tear ourselves down the middle, we're gonna make ourselves like such easy targets for the duos to pick off. So I'm like, we have to like somehow come to like our own understanding. But I'm like, we're basically fucked here, because no matter who we target, they'll have majority if they just get that person on their side. And like if we tear ourselves down the middle, they can target whoever they want. And that's exactly what happened, like with Chris going, because I find out that Sean had pitched my name, which it wasn't like too surprising because he had already voted for me. But I was like, damn, I do not want to fight another fight. So I had to throw his name out in return after he did mine. And so I was just like so scared going into that vote that I would go home. But I was just hoping that my relationship with the duos who would have majority over it, like with Zap and Izzy and Ginger, would hold more weight than I guess Sean's. And it ended up being Chris, which Sean had been like, it might not be either of us because we've been fighting this whole time. I'm like, I don't think we're that lucky. And I guess we were. And I wasn't really too mad about Chris going. I would have voted Chris had like I known, but because Chris like barely ever spoke. He was just like very dry to me, especially. So I would have voted him because Zap had brought up like putting votes on him, but I'm like, I don't want to split our votes up because then I'm at risk of going. And had Sean and Elle done me like how they kind of wanted to, like I would have been out because of them splitting the votes between us. So I'm like, I really don't think Sean has an idol here. But yeah, Chris ends up going, and I get why my name had been thrown out because I mean, I was so close to winning that immunity too, and I was so mad that Lisa won it because I probably would have gone after her. But because I really didn't want to go after Sean, because I really like Sean. Even after he voted me, he was like, "It's nothing personal." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. Like, I still like you, and I know you had to or whatever." But um, yeah, I would say like going into that, I knew that something bad was going to happen. It was going to be me or Chip's name thrown out. So I was shocked when Chris went, but I wasn't like upset. I was more so upset that no one bothered to tell me, just like at the Peanut vote, because I wasn't like, oh, I'll die for Peanut. I was like, no one telling me that, like with Ginger and Gold, especially. And during that entire merge vote, like I'd say L, Tig, Gold, and Ginger, they didn't even like say a word to me about the vote. So I was getting really pissed off with how they were acting because I'm like, I thought we'd been working together before, and now they don't even want to talk to me about tribal. Like they don't even want to DM me a singular time. I'm like, you guys think you have all the power of the game, and that pisses me off more than anything. So yeah, I think that's the thing that
So
pisses me off more than anything, just how comfortable and cocky the duos now had the feeling of because they had all that momentum.
well, just like magic at that point, you have your window of timing because at this point now, Zap and Izzy are going to start to split off from the other two duos in the wake of that final 13 vote. And you're going to
Yeah,
have a window of daylight. Now, it is Chip's name that's coming out from the duos at
yeah,
this
and
next tribal.
I still didn't get why Chip's name was coming from them because Chip had been someone who they had gone out of their way to like work with before over people who were like very like starkly after them. So I felt like they were trying to just take the easiest road possible, which was like a trend I saw a few times during the game I didn't really like when people just try to take the easy route, like especially this deep into it.
I guess
But
that actually is an interesting question about your overall philosophy on playing Survivor. Like, if there's someone in the game who you saw as a quieter player, the way some of the other people saw Chip, even if you disagreed with that assessment of Chip, like if there's a quieter player who's not making a ton of waves, when would you consider the right time to take a swing at one of those quieter players in sort of the quote unquote easy vote or the vote against the quieter player?
well, I think more so like easy votes, like so people who are going to make the end easily, those people you kind of want to try to get out before they're tempting to take to them. But I would say like at this point, it didn't feel too much like that. It felt like they felt that they'd have the easiest like path at getting numbers just by throwing Chip's name out and everyone be like, yeah, let's do it. Like, let's just do what they want because they would feel like they'd have total control instead of like trying to take out someone who's going to be after them because Chip wasn't actually after them at all. That's what irked me more than anything when they were throwing Chip's name out because I'm like, I thought we were working with them before this. And now they're throwing her name out just because they want an easy round where no one like has to do anything against them, I guess. So it made voting against them so much nicer because they finally felt the pain that a lot of us had been feeling throughout the game of having less power than the rest of them.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, in that final 12 round where ultimately Ginger's going to go out of the game, what were your conversations like, especially with the two Seans and Malachi, in trying to get them to go in on the Ginger plan there?
So I don't remember where the ginger plan came from. I think first person I talked to about it was with like Lisa, that she was like talking to me about how Zap and Izzy wanted ginger now. And so I'd probably talk to Sean and Malachi and the other Sean about it, just like as being like, so we all want the same thing here, right? Yeah, let's. I'm like, I'm willing to forgive whatever the fuck happened last vote when you guys voted me because I'm not gonna take anything personally. Like, I might be like extremely paranoid, but I'm not the kind of person who's gonna be like, I will never work with you again because you wrote my name down. But I just feel like a lot of us were on the same page about getting the duos out. And before that vote even happened, both Lisa and Malachi were saying that the other one of them was trying to get the votes onto Izzy. And I'm like, that's probably the worst move we could possibly make right now, to vote out Izzy whenever Izzy and Zap are flipping to our side, because they're about to burn their only bridges in the game and they would only have us to work with. So we would kind of leave them stranded. But I guess this worked against me pretty much because it made it look like I was like gonna go to bat for them every time, but I just wanted to make their position a lot weaker and make the other duo's positions weaker because there'd be one less of the other four, and then Izzy and Zap wouldn't have a reason to distrust us, but they wouldn't trust them.
So you think that the degree to which you defended Izzy and Zap in that round is going to end up playing a factor in how you become one of the targets the following round?
I think it might have been like a part of people thinking that I was like super duper, like all up in Izzy and Zap's like side. But you know, like they were the only people who were telling me stuff anyways. I wasn't exactly like social with everyone because people didn't want to talk to me because everyone thought I was like extremely paranoid, which I was like anxious and stuff and paranoid, but I was never like acting on paranoia. Like I never like went around doing stupid shit because I was worried. I was just telling people that I was nervous.
Now, after that, we'll come to the final 11 round. And obviously, this is the round where you end up going out of the game. At what point in the round did you realize that your name was coming out?
So this day was my last day of being at school. I had like told two all-nighters the days before because of finals, and I was just exhausted and I had to pack and stuff. I wake up like maybe a few hours before tribal, which was a common occurrence for me. But and I hear, oh yeah, they're throwing your name out. And so Izzy and Zap kept being like, no, it's gonna be Izzy or whatever, or it's gonna be L. And they're like, yeah, Lisa and Sean are gonna vote with us. And then Izzy tells me Malachi had been telling Izzy to vote for me because it was gonna be between me or her. And I'm like, I don't get why he would even say that. Like that's kind of stupid. So I knew Malachi wasn't gonna vote with me. Like I knew he's going to definitely vote against me. So I'm like, the only people who I can depend on here have voted against me twice already. And so it would just be easiest for their games to get rid of me. And I didn't have like much time to fight because I had maybe like an hour to pack all my stuff so I could go home. And I had just gotten into the car to head back home when tribal started. And I'm like, I'm definitely going home. So there wasn't really much I could do. Like all I did was give like the best pitches I could to Lisa, but I knew it was not going to be like worth. Like it wouldn't work with her. She wasn't gonna ever have my side, I guess.
Now, if you'd had a little more time that day, is there anything you would have done differently to try to
Oh yeah,
scramble in that tribal?
yeah. I would have had like I would have done a lot more, but I couldn't. I just physically
Yeah.
could
No,
not
I'm
do.
just curious what the plan would have looked like if you had the chance to try to put it into place. What would the
I don't
plan
really.
have looked like?
There's a part of me that thinks I might have thrown Izzy under the bus, but I don't think they would have voted her at that point. But I do think people wanting to do Izzy the round before might have helped me shift votes onto her that round, but I would have felt like shit doing that. But I don't know. It was so long. I don't know what would have done anything that tribal. So I would have tried more to pitch to Lisa, be like, listen, I know you don't like me much, but you're going to need me moving forward because I don't have anyone really. And you pissed off like mostly everyone here.
Now, out of the people who ended up voting for you, which is going to be Lisa, Hig, L, Sean, Gold, Malachi, and the other Sean. So that's out of the 7 votes for you. Do you think any of those people made a mistake for their game in going along with the plan to vote you?
I mean, I don't really know because I think the people who were in the middle and wanted to ping pong back and forth, like Sean and Lisa and Malachi and the other Sean, they were positioned pretty well to do so. I think they should have still gotten rid of another duo just in case something would have happened, like within because you guys said there would be more rewards and then there just weren't, which was weird. But yeah, I would have gone after another duo over me when I had like literally nobody, but I don't know. I think it was so early. No one wanted to make like some big like play anymore because everyone was like already heated enough. So I think I was just everyone's easiest option at that tribal, which because even whenever I was on Ponderosa, no one gave me like a logical reason as to why they voted me. Everyone was just like they said they didn't know, and then people would be like, "Oh, I wanted to do Izzy." Like half of you say that.
Well, that
I,
actually brings up another topic then. So, when you got to Ponderosa, how did you feel about your fellow jurors and the spirit of Ponderosa, especially when you first got there?
I mean, when I first got there, it was just Ginger and Chris, but Chris was like literally he was somehow the mayor of Ponderosa, but he showed up maybe 3 times. He's like one of those politicians who's been like, I don't know, has there ever been a politician who only shows up 3 times a year? I
Oh,
don't
there's
know.
definitely been a few of them, yeah. So,
Yeah,
you
so he
felt
was
it
one
was
of
that
those.
sort of situation with
Yeah, but
Chris?
Ginger was super nice. Even though I voted for him, I was like, yeah, I just had to move because that's like what was probably going to be best for me at the time. Like voting out Chip wouldn't have made sense. And he was like, yeah, I get it. But I'd say at that point, I was like kind of just exhausted. And so I liked having Ginger there because he's like a really nice guy. And then following that, tribal was like the most intense one of the season. So I'm like, with how exhausted I had been, I think I would have been a total bitch to everyone about, at that tribal if I'd been there.
So, yeah, I guess that's true since so being at Ponderosa, you still got, like, quite the, you were still able to see everything that happened in that
Tribal,
final
yeah.
10 tribal,
Yeah,
with the block being
oh,
played.
it was quite a show for us. It was, I don't know how fun it was to watch because everyone was like kind of rude, but it was fun seeing everyone upset with each other. Like, the part of you when you get out and you're like, I hate everybody, blah, 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 blah. But I'm like, it's fun seeing people upset with each other after something like so minor, like they can't talk in DMs now. It's like, you're still in, shut up. It's like, oh my God, quit complaining that you can't talk in DMs. It's like, you guys have a clear majority and you're not going to do anything like crazy this round, anyways. Like, Zap's the only one. Like, I loved Zap for doing that. I loved Zap for giving Chip immunity and then doing the fire thing. I'm like, that was awesome to watch. Because, like, at that point, they were trying to do Chip there and be like, yeah, another round of them trying to do what's easiest for them. And I bet even
Now, would
if the block hadn't been played, it would have still been like them voting for Chip.
now would you say at that point Chip was the person you were rooting for most in the game, or was there anyone else you were really rooting for at that point?
I was rooting for Chip so much, but I was like, there's not much hope for her to get far because I don't think people like ever were trying to get to know her like I did. So I was kind of like, I was just rooting for Zap, Izzy, and Chip. I was also rooting for Malachi and Shawnee A because like Sean.
I think we lost you for a second there. You were talking about why you were rooting for EA Sean. Uh, I- okay, I think your sound's not coming through right now. Um, here. Are you still able to hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so yeah, I think it's Alex's sound isn't coming through, so we'll hold things there for a moment till That's the sound starts coming through again. For those of you waiting with us through the audio. Oh, there we are.
Hold on. Okay,
Welcome
hi.
back, Alex.
Hi.
Um,
What
so
happened?
your
Oh, I couldn't hear you.
sound cut out a little in the middle of telling
Yeah.
us about why you were rooting for EA, Sean.
Okay, yeah, because EA Sean, he like took even whenever he didn't have to talk to me, he like still did. And so like that's not something that a lot of people were doing this season. I felt like people like closed doors the second they didn't have to use people for their games anymore. Like I felt like L, Tig, Gold, like Sean, they never wanted to talk to me if they didn't need my vote. So like I appreciated people who were like they were just socializing. They were just doing what you probably should do. Because like I didn't always talk to people whenever I didn't have to because I was just so busy. But I get why some other people weren't. But yeah, I was definitely just rooting for Zap, Izzy, Chip, Sean, EA, and Malachi after I gotten out.
All right. From there, let's just zip through the remaining tribals a little bit. Are there any other tribals that you saw that stood out to you from your time while you were at Ponderosa?
Let's see. So the final 7 tribal with L trying to play a fake idol, that thing was so ugly. Like I don't get it, but he was doing like everything he could to try to stay. I just don't think like the route he took was like very effective. Like why would you tell people you're an idol so that they don't vote for you? I feel like that would make me want to vote for you more just to make sure that you have to use it. Because especially if you're saying, "Oh, I'm voting Izzy for sure," like, okay, do that, and then she'll go home. Like, why would I let? I feel like he went about it the wrong way. He should have threatened to target someone else, make people have to like start scrambling. But
Yeah, that's
I felt I loved the final 6 tribal. Sean, you're in the audience. I loved you for that. That was so like fucking baller. Like you made like even if though you didn't survive it, like you had better odds of surviving it than them. The bot just didn't like you. Like I don't know. I just like you made a move for yourself, which I didn't think a lot of people were always doing. I felt like some people were like playing just to get far, not to like really set themselves up besides like play under the radar or whatever and like do what's easiest for them. Like I felt like you took a risk that would have paid off if had it gone the right way. So, and then final 5 stood out for like all the wrong reasons because that vote should not have gone that way. But yeah, that I think it was the two. How old was Malachi? Is Malachi 18 or
let me quickly
I think he?
check. I don't know off the top. Yeah, 18.
Yeah, so Malachi and Sean, the 2 teenage guys, they got bombarded by the girls. It felt like very Micronesia.
Okay, that's a comparison I can understand where you're coming from with.
Yeah, it's not like the flirt route, but like the girls' alliance bombarded the young guys into doing something stupid for themselves. But I feel like Gold also completely mishandled the final 6 vote to where he was like owning up to targeting those two. So it was like really bad for him. But then, yeah. But Final Tribal was that stood out for like all the wrong reasons. But I was just happy that I could at least like, I don't know, try to give them something that they could both answer.
So how did you feel about the jury vote you ended up casting? Was it a hard decision for you, or were you
I
like,
almost slept through it. Like I made a parchment for both of them, sent them both in my submissions, and then I almost like slept through all of it. Like I woke up after the initial deadline, which was like 3 hours ahead of the votes being read, so it didn't even make sense why that would be a thing. But um, it was tough. But like in the end, I was like, Izzy's winning, but I know Zap deserves the credit. And like Izzy literally DM'd me after, and she's like, "I'm glad you gave Zap a vote because I knew neither of them would take it personally." like whoever I voted. But I'm like, Zap deserves so much credit for like how much she's been standing up for herself during this tribal. Because I had to sit through all of Ponderosa watching people like shit all over Zap whenever they were like not doing that good, in my opinion. But so I was like team both of them because they were the two people who was like, I was like, I thought there was no way they could make the end, either of them. And then they both did. I'm like, this is awesome. This is like the best way the season could have ended with how people had been behaving. So I was super happy about it. And I was like, I was worried that if I voted Zap and other people were on the same train of thought as me, that it could end up costing Izzy a win here. But I also didn't feel like many people, I was surprised Tig voted for Zap, but I don't feel bad about my vote. I voted Zap because I feel like she played super well and wasn't being given the credit she deserved. And she didn't deserve to get swept in the jury vote. So I wanted to make sure she at least had some love coming her way.
Now, overall, about how you feel looking back on the season, do you feel happy about how you played in this season? Like, what's your overall take on how things went?
I mean, for this being like my first like actual org that I've ever done, I'm happy with how I did. Like I know I didn't do that great because I like strained a bunch of my relationships pretty early on and I've like lost my time management abilities to where I was just like not interested in talking to certain people anymore. But like I had a pretty good experience for a first org, despite how like toxic the season would get at sometimes and how frustrating people were to deal with. And like how much I got targeted because I think I got like 15 votes against me. But you know, I'm grateful for everything that I got to experience in this because now I know like how people act in real orgs and how to handle it. Because it's like where I usually play, everyone's like already known each other, played with the same people a bunch, so no one cares about like getting to know anyone anymore. So I came into this with like very strategy oriented thing, but like now it's like everyone knows that you have to be super duper social, like how Izzy was and stuff. Because like the people who only focus on strategy like had all their relationships gone by the time merge rolled around. So I'm very happy
Right.
about it.
I think that's a good segue into Ashley's three big questions about our season.
Yes. So the first one is, do you talk to anyone from your season still?
Um, yeah. Well, despite Izzy not even saying that she still talks to me, she does. I still talk to Izzy, Zap, and Chip. I don't really talk to anyone else, but yeah, I still talk to those three daily.
Okay. Gotcha. And then the next question is, well, this is your first org. So this is kind of I'll have to change this question up a little bit. What is the difference between playing, like Roblox long terms versus like not an actual org,
I
but like,
I call them the Roblox orgs and Discord orgs because there's Roblox long terms where they do like sessions in a Roblox game, which is like that's not what I do. I don't.
oh,
So like it's basically Discord orgs, but all the challenges are Roblox, and we only started doing them because we all met playing the Roblox Survivor game and made a Discord where we do like speeds in the game, and so then we started making like Discord orgs, but like we would do a bunch of Roblox challenges. So I just call them Roblox orgs because they're from the Roblox community, but we don't actually like do them in Roblox.
okay. Yeah. That makes sense.
Like you know, Pickle Productions.
Yes.
That was like started and stuff by the people from the Roblox like groups. They just don't do Roblox challenges because they're doing more like how the Discord orgs do.
Repeat that?
Like you know, Pickle Productions. Like you guys just did a partnership with them.
Yes.
Like those people are from the Roblox org community. Like this, like the Roblox community. Basically the same people who I Like, no, because I'm friends with like all the hosts and stuff in there.
Gotcha. Okay. And yeah, I remember you mentioning that, like I
Yeah.
think a personal conversation once. And so it's really interesting. Like a lot of people that I've met have like transitioned from that sort of game that you've played into like these kind of orgs. And
Yeah.
so I'm really curious to know like what you feel like differences are between them, and especially one that is so like, especially like having, excuse me, your first one be one that has such a large like viewer count, and one that is like popular or like well known, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So like with the Roblox orgs, there's no like spectator open confessionals. Like everyone's confessionals are private. You can add maybe like a few people to your confessionals where they can talk in there with you, and like so, and then alliances are made in group chats, and you just add the host to them. They're like way more laid back and stuff, and it's basically been the same like community and stuff playing over and over. So by this point, everyone knows each other's games. Like I won All Stars because I basically studied how people had been behaving for about 3 months and like had learned a bunch through their old seasons, and I knew how to handle everybody. And so it made it really easy for me to know exactly what to say to every single person. Like I studied these people like a psycho. And so I'd say they're like way more laid back because everyone's younger. No one takes it like that seriously. There's never like that big of prizes. And people play together like so much, and we're all friends outside of it anyway. So it's like at this point, strategy is like way bigger than like just socializing because everyone already knows each other. So there's like it kind of removes the first part of the game, like the socializing, getting to know people away. And people are like, it's basically evolved. Everyone's like obsessed with making big moves and stuff. So people are like always doing the most to pull off like the craziest pluralities or stuff. So it's like way more strategy oriented and like team TV oriented than like just plain like social gaming. And I'd say it's a lot less like serious than these. Um, the Roblox community is like pretty toxic though, like because it's a bunch of kids. But like, there's a lot of people who are from there that I really like. Like I met Rowan from Roblox, so she never really did that much Roblox orgs. Like the only time my first Roblox org was with Roman, but she had to quit like during pre-merge. But that was before we were like really even that much of friends. But I would say like it's just like way more laid back than these. Like, and people are always just doing the absolute most, and no one like gets super dramatic, I guess. But they're also like way younger. So this is my first time playing with a bunch of people who are older. Like the only person I had met from like the org community before this that I had played with in like a Roblox one was Court, and it was during like a Blood versus Water season that I had met her.
Yes, I do remember that Court was excited to watch you play, and that you had mentioned that you knew Court.
Yeah.
Okay, very interesting, that perspective and just the differences that come with all the different kinds of orgs that exist, you know, because like they're all the same base game, but they're so wildly different. Like there's
Also, scheduling is insanely different. Like we
yeah,
don't do the whole one day like challenge, next day tribal. We do challenge day and tribal day like the same day, unless like we do a 24-hour challenge. Like tribals are always 3 hours after. Like tribals are like the same day that the challenge ends. So usually you have like maybe 5 hours or something to plan for tribal. So that's why I was having such anxiety spirals during tribal phases, because getting used to having 24 hours to plan where it would be like, yeah, we're going to do this. And it was just that simple. And then you wouldn't talk to people for 8 hours. Like, that's not something that I'm used to. I'm used to if you don't like hear from someone for 30 minutes, there's something bad happening. And that's like how I've gone out with idols in pockets, how I've gotten like left out of votes, how like really bad things have happened to me because I don't keep in touch for like 30 minutes. So that's where that paranoia of it's too quiet came from for me, because I'm not used to like the slower pacing of these. Because I've had a joint tribal where I would be on VC with people for 10 hours straight, like in and outs of different VCs. Plans have shifted like 6 different times. People are like playing idols, and the vote shifted maybe a minute before the vote's locked. Like on 2 different sides, the vote changed to avoid an idol play. And so I'm used to a much more fast paced game than this. So it was like really stressful going through tribals where I wouldn't hear anything from people for hours on end, because it was just actually that easy. Like, I can't let myself believe things are going that well for me for it to be easy.
Right. Like I can imagine, especially for you, like King Paranoia, like that had to have made it worse, you know?
Yeah. Like, that's where most of my anxiety early on came from, just the pacing of it being too slow for me because I'm not used to it.
Speaking of anxiety, that brings me into my final question, which is, you know, mental health is obviously something that we focus on a lot in this org. It's kind of something that sets us apart. And so we like to ask, you know, what you feel like the impact this org has had on mental health, and also just to not focus on negativity. Like, what are some ways that you were able to take care of yourself if you
So
needed to?
I feel like this it didn't impact my negative, like, mental health that negatively. Like, honestly, I I've done so many orgs, and like I've won one, and that was like a great feeling. So now I no longer feel like like distinct urge to like I must win or whatever. Like, when things are going wrong for me, I was frustrated because I was putting a lot of time into it, but I also was so busy with school. That's where most of my drain came from. Like, just school was happening, and I was doing fine, like, mentally with the org. People were just like exhausting to try to talk to sometimes. So there'd be some people who were just like, ugh, they were kind of annoying. Like, I'm not even gonna be like subtle about it. Some people just like were annoying to talk to. But I don't feel like my mental health was too negatively impacted by the org. I know it like seemed like a total paranoid mess and stuff, but that's like how I am in real life. I just have like a lot of anxiety, and I think super, like, I overthink everything. All my brain just runs through 1,000 thoughts like every second, and I always like fixate on the bad ones because I want to be prepared for the worst outcomes. So I always like get anxious about things. Like, that's just how I am. So I wouldn't even say that it's like the org. That's just how I am in real life. But I'd say like taking care of myself would just be like, because sometimes I would have time, but I would just take it to like enjoy myself because I'd been doing so much for school to the point where I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna like chill for a bit. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much for sharing those with us. We'll move now into our segments. The first segment we have here is 2 to 3 players from your season other than the winner who you were particularly impressed by.
Um, Definitely Zap, because like even early on, I could just tell she was like super confident. And like Zap wasn't afraid of like how a lot of people were just trying to be super under the radar the whole time, and like to the point where they were letting other people like sort of run plans and stuff. I was like really, like, she just didn't care how people felt about her for like threat level wise. So, and then she was able to win out, which I didn't think would be possible, and that was awesome. And I'd say EA Sean, he was like really good. And early on, I didn't really know much about him, so I was like, I can't tell if he's just trying to take it easy or not. But then once like merge hit, and he was part of like the ping ponging group, I was like, yeah, he's definitely like the one who's like. I felt like he was probably running that group because it always felt like he had a really strong strategic sense and social sense. So yeah, I was impressed with Zap and EA Sean the most.
All right, next we'll go to 2 to 3 players from your season who you were who you really enjoyed getting to meet personality and character level?
Um, Chip for sure. I love Chip. Like I can't like explain how much I adore Chip now because at the beginning I didn't think I'd like Chip much because she was like pretty quiet at the start, but like as she got more comfortable, she was just like such a joy to talk to. She was just like the most real person there. Um, let me think. Who else? I really like Izzy. I watched a few of her TikToks and they were so funny. And Izzy's just like she's just a nice person. Like for a while I couldn't tell if she was being serious or not. She's just like a nice person who's able to like be a villain in the org, be like I don't know, I love her. Um what was the question? Was it like who was surprising character or just like who I liked
Just
there?
people who you enjoyed getting to meet.
Okay. Let me think. Let me think of a pre-merge now. I'd say I really enjoyed getting to meet Disc too, even though he voted for me and then he got out pre-merge. I really liked Disc and I was really sad that he went home. Cause like him and I
Okay.
just talked about some stuff and I was like, he's just super nice to talk to.
All right, and last segment that we have here is our moments of the season for you. So we want one surprising moment, one happy moment, and one funny moment from the season for you.
Can you go through that again? I was so no.
A surprising moment, a happy moment, and a funny moment from the season for you.
Surprising. Most surprising moment was Izzy and Zap making the final tribal. Like, even when Merge started, I thought there's literally no way because they had the two highest. Like, I saw them as the two biggest threats of anyone. Like, I saw them as the two best players out of anyone, and they were a duo. And everyone was fixated on Zap. So I was so shocked they were both able to make it to that point because I didn't feel like they're like even pre-merge. I'm like, there's no way Zap gets far. Even during like the minutes comp, when I'm like, Zap will surely be like knocked out immediately. Like no one did it, which I thought was pretty. I thought that was surprising too. That was the fact that Zap won the comp where people could sabotage her. That was super shocking to me. Um, but yeah, I just say like Zap and Izzy being able to dominate, despite the fact that everyone wanted them dead. That was the most like surprising thing for me. What's the next one? Happiest?
Something a happiest moment of the season, yeah.
Um, let me think. I would say probably just the talks I had with Chip during while we were on Ponderosa because like she had fought for me after I got out and I was like you shouldn't have had to do that but thank you I guess like it just showed me that it was more than just a game relationship. I really appreciated that because it's like a lot of times people you'll play with them and then they'll just forget about you forever and you won't manage them. And I wanted to come into this and make like friends that I could like talk to after this because like that's the kind of people I just like to work with. People who I know I'll be friends with after the season, like Zap, Izzy, and Chip. Really.
All right, and lastly, we have the funniest moment of the season for you.
Funniest. Hmm. Maybe even though I was really sad that Peanut got out, when Peanut told Sean, no offense, but I hope it's you, that made me like cackle, honestly. Or when Lisa took Greed and was like, I'm going to make sure one of my targets goes home. And then Ava gets out. I was cracking up. I'm sorry. That was so funny for me. Because Lisa was like, I mean, that was before Lisa was like super rude to me, but like, Lisa was just a lot to handle
Yeah,
for me.
mm, those are both really hilarious moments. I'm glad I did them. All right, well, thank you again for joining us today. It doesn't look like we have spectator questions from the audience right now. But it's been great having you both on the season and here as an interview guest today. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, everything that happened. So with that said, this has been another episode of the Villain Viver podcast. This has been Elk, and along with me today, we've had
Ashley?
And Alex.
all
Hi.
right, and we're gonna go ahead and move this into our post show.